I'm Dennis Anderson along with Julie Zenner, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
With Labor Day behind us, the rush to the November general election is officially on. There are a number of interesting races in the region, and we'll analyze some of the big ones.
September is Hunger Action Month. It's a time to draw attention to the need right here in our own communities.
And we'll have the week's business headlines and a news file story from 25 years ago.
It's all coming up next on Almanac North. Hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thanks for watching. Julie, good to be back after a couple of weeks away, but I'm sure you held down the fort beautifully.
We did, but you were off having kind of a grand adventure.
My wife and I, we hosted a tour to England, and some viewers from this area, quite a few viewers actually, went to Highclere Castle, where Downton Abbey is filmed, and a lot of people around here love Downton Abbey on PBS.
Did you get to do high tea?
We had high tea.
All right, I can almost smell the raspberries and the crumpets.
There you go. Well, let's get started.
All right. Thanks, Denny, and welcome everyone. With summer so short in the Northland, people tend not to pay attention to political campaigns until after Labor Day, despite the candidates' best efforts. With 60 days until the election, get ready for the floodgates to open as candidates hit the airwaves, the newspapers, the billboards, the yard signs, in an effort to drum up votes. Some experts are here to prepare us for the onslaught. Spano is founder and director of UMD's Master of Advocacy and Political Leadership program, and Alisa von Hagel is an assistant professor of political science at UW Superior. And thanks so much to both of you for being here.
You bet.
Why in the big Minnesota races, which incumbent do you think is facing the biggest challenge?
Probably Rick Nolan. It's probably a little bit closer there than any place else, but yeah, I think the governor's doing reasonably well. I think Senator Franken's doing reasonably well, but Rick has the most difficulty.
Now, does that explain why all the outside money is coming in on that race?
Could explain some of that. Yeah, that's for sure. But I think he's going to win. But it's close because the district has changed. It's a lot different than when Denny and I first started tracking it some years ago. It's not nearly as predictable as it once was. And
Alisa, what are the big issues facing candidates this year and the voters?
Well, I mean, in the Minnesota 8th, the focus seems to be primarily on the polymet issue, and so that seems to be a significant emphasis of both candidates to talk about this. Also for the in that Senate race between Franken and McFadden, that is also something that they continue to focus on. And we see in some political ads there's a lot of focus on, or perhaps candidates demonstrating that they are carry firearms, that they are ensuring that they protect those rights for the constituents. And so that's perhaps not necessarily a very controversial issue, but that's something that we're seeing, and that perhaps is still coming out as a potential issue.
Is McFadden relatively unknown up here, or is that not a fair question?
I guess I'm not familiar in terms of sort of the demographics, how frequently he's visiting here, of how much the population is aware of him as a candidate, and so I don't know if
it really feels, I think it's a good question, Deb, because it really feels like the big hunky money should have been sort of coming earlier. He needed some introduction time, and
which he didn't get.
And it
Apparently.
just hasn't been happening, and now we're kind of in the middle of it. And I think Senator Franken's done a great job of taking away the ability to run against them. unless you just don't like the guy. But there just aren't enough good, solid issues, and he hasn't made enough kind of bad mistakes to give people a chance to hammer him. And in that kind of environment, McFadden really needs lots of name ID, and he doesn't seem to have it yet.
How tough is it for a political newcomer to go up against not just a sitting senator, but one who also has some celebrity attached to him?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it is a very significant challenge. Again, with incumbents, you know, the role of money, certainly incumbents are going to be much more likely to get party contributions, to have that name recognition necessary for fundraising. And so really, if, you know, again, for somebody who's a newcomer, it's, you know, to get enough name recognition so that they can get that fundraising. Well, they can't do that if they don't have, a significant sort of pot of money to begin with. And so it's sort of this circular argument where they continue to, need that money to reach out to voters, but it can be very difficult if they're not able to fundraise in the same, rate as in a sitting incumbent who has so many more resources.
And if I can, let me say one thing that's changed significantly in Minnesota, and that is the difference between the communications money and what we call field, the staff kind of money, the folks that you hire to go. We have shifted in Minnesota dramatically, on the DFL side, very dramatically, to field. The mayor of Minneapolis was elected without one single dime spent on advertising. It was all field.
Really?
Now, there's no major city in the country that's doing it quite that much. The ranked choice voting had a little bit to do with that. It made the dynamic different, but politicians, at least on the DFL side in Minnesota, are really depending on that independent contact.
Yeah.
And I think that that's an important point to make here, that again, in a midterm election, oftentimes there's significantly lower turnout as compared to presidential elections. And so, it's really about turning out your base, of having that, ground game established so that you are ensuring that voters are turning out. So again, the barrage of campaigns, of commercials on TV, on billboards, at a certain point, especially as it gets to late October, I think voters just really tune all of that out. And so if you are only going, using your money in that capacity without establishing that ground game, you're not turning out your base. And if you're not turning out your base, you're relying on independents, moderates, who are much less likely to turn out during a midterm election.
Historically, presidents aren't as popular in their second term. We can check that all throughout American history. But as a result of that, is there a danger now in this election, this midterm election coming up, that some people who may not like the current president would hence not vote for a Democrat this time around? Or are we going to see a lot of that?
I think it's beginning to slip on both sides, this connection of the party all the way up and down. Yes, Obama's unpopular, but the Congress is even more, and so it's just hard for me to understand how people are going to do it in that way. All the Democrats must be bad.
But I think that you are seeing candidates who are assuming that is the case, and so you see a number of Democratic senators that are in, what have been labeled competitive races. So Franken, Shaheen in New Hampshire, Warner in Virginia. They're they are distancing themselves from the president's policy. We see most recently in Syria, and I think that you see these Republican challengers are, emphasizing their connection, their voting record with the president as a way to, hopefully, again, sort of, use that dynamic that you mentioned. And so whether or not that actually is effective, I think, is too soon to tell.
You
but
mean we won't be seeing Obama here?
So Senator Franken's 97% voting record with the president isn't going to hurt him yet.
Well, he probably won't talk about it a lot.
How about the Wisconsin governor's race? Because that's really kind of setting itself up to be pretty interesting with Mary Burke, who's not positioning herself as a labor populist so much as a fiscal conservative businesswoman.
No, absolutely. And I think, really that is a race that I think, you can say that, there is national attention to. I think, with the recall, with with so much emphasis on, or discussion of Scott Walker, his term in office, what he did as governor, and these projections that he is considering running for the Republican nomination for the presidency in 2016. I think there's just so much focus, and yes, it's turning out to be really just a fascinating race in terms of this, as you mentioned, a fiscal conservative, Democratic candidate who's been very successful at holding her own against the sitting governor, with having less money at her disposal, having less fundraising dollars, and so yeah.
Just 2 years ago, Scott Walker won a recall election and with more votes than he won his original election, and now he's sliding in the polls.
And so, yeah, as there have been recent polls that just came out that Burke is ahead by anywhere between 1 to 4 points, which is the first time I believe that she's pulled ahead in this race. But they have been neck and neck for all summer. So, it's hard to say at this point if one will, start to pull ahead of the other. But I guess I would anticipate that it would continue to be that close, really up until Election Day.
Scott Walker has kind of been lifted up as a poster child for the National Republican Party, or a darling of the party anyway. Right. Is it an embarrassment if he doesn't win that race in Wisconsin?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, but embarrassment. I'm finding in my later years that political folks don't get embarrassed nearly as much as I used to think they did.
There's no shame in politics, right?
Well, it's not exactly that. It's just that, it's winning and losing and doing the policies you want, and whether it looks like embarrassment to other people doesn't really matter. In Walker's case, I frankly am not surprised. We and all kinds of folks particularly in the labor movement in Minnesota, tried to talk Wisconsin unions out of doing that recall. It was just a bad idea from the beginning. It was bound to lose, and it did lose, and set him up as kind of a star. Now, if he can't live through that and keep his stardom, yeah, it's kind of embarrassing.
Are political ads this time around more civil than they've been in the past?
We actually have a couple of examples that maybe we could air and then
Let's take
talk
a look
about
at
that.
I'm Stuart Mills. I guess I don't look like a typical politician, so people always ask me, why am I running for Congress? It starts with my family's hunting camp doctrine. If you complain about something, you get the job to fix it. Well, I'm fed up with Washington, the bickering, the debt, Obamacare. Instead of complaining, I'm gonna fight to fix it. I'm Stuart Mills, and I approve this message because this hunting camp could teach Washington a thing or two.
Washington can't seem to see it, but we sure do in Minnesota. Stop wasting taxpayer dollars on so-called nation building overseas and other programs that don't work. Fix those that do. But when it comes to Social Security and Medicare, seniors have earned it. We've got to protect it. I'm Rick Nolan, and I approve this message because we've got to balance the budget, but we've got to do it the right way.
Both candidates are strapping on the blaze orange in these ads.
Yes.
So who do you vote for? So let's go back. More civil this time?
I think that, so I guess I should give a disclaimer. I'm from the Chicagoland area, so I think all political ads,
Pretty blasé
are,
here.
it's a little bit tamer than perhaps what I'm used to. So I have to sort of give that caveat. And I think that we do see with some of the candidates that they are, whether it's this race or even in the, the Minnesota gubernatorial race, that there's perhaps not the hostility or the attack ads that really go after character or some of these other sort of attacks that perhaps have been used in the past.
I think Nolan is going to win, just looking at those two. And part of the reason is, as they say in the political world, something wrong about the optics for Mills. The hair is wrong. I hate this. I sound like an old fuddy-duddy, but there's something about the optics there that just don't seem to fit the 8th district. And that whole campaign is being run out of Washington. and it has a feel of we're a bunch of rubes out here. And so if we do one more gun ad and one more nutty gun ad, I mean, I guess the latest one is really strange.
So you believe that local voters can spot that?
Oh yeah, and I think we're getting to the point where his campaign isn't going to work.
And I think that what's interesting about that dynamic is, in the summer when, perhaps only a few political scientists and journalists are paying attention to these campaigns, that, Mills did perhaps look like a potential challenger. And so, Nolan has not been engaged in a lot of fundraising. He's not, making these attack ads and doing the types of things that perhaps politicos do. And the one negative attack against Stuart Mills that got a lot of press, that was sort of considered by some to be misleading, was funded by, a Washington PAC that, was in no way related to the Nolan campaign. And so, again, that was something that perhaps voters aren't going to be responsive to, and again, reflects that sort of, not recognizing this DC, messaging and framing.
Well, love them or hate them, we're going to be seeing a lot of political ads coming up in the next couple of months. And
this is the one station, though, where we can say, hey, if they don't work, that's fine.
All right, so send in your pledge dollars. Thanks so much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Great.
Now, let's dig into our news file archive for a look at what was making news 25 years ago this week.
Well, if you like what you saw last year, Ice Capades officials say, though it's tough to top after 50 years, this year you'll not only see it better, but hear it better as well.
Enhanced sound will certainly add to your listening pleasure while watching an ice show. Enhanced lighting will bring the colors of the costumes even out better. So all those things will have to work together to the ultimate goal, to make a better show.
Other changes include this free-hanging stage used as a backdrop for crews today filming the show's national commercial. And for the first time in 30 years, Barbie, the famous doll, will come alive to make her debut on skates. Nintendo characters from the video game will also make an appearance, as well as a barrage of theatrics, illusions, and carnivals on ice.
I think you could just cover it from 5 to 80, or whoever can come, because it just appeals to all people. It's the greatest family show in the country.
Ice Capades directors and choreographers say all of the high-tech and famous characters is secondary to the event that made the show what it is today, professional skating.
When you use special effects, you should enhance what is there already. So what you're trying to do with special effects is really bring out even more what the talent is.
The statistics are eye-opening. According to a 2014 report, more than 46 million Americans face hunger. Now that's 1 out of every 7 of us. And yet each year, billions of pounds of food go to waste. September is Hunger Action Month, a time to call attention to the hunger problem and help make a difference. And here to tell us how we can all help is Shaye Moris, Executive Director of Second Harvest Northern Lakes Food Bank. Shaye, thanks a lot for being here tonight. Now the color orange is highlighting the hunger problem. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so it's just a color that was selected by Feeding America, our national organization. So we had Hunger Action Day yesterday where we asked everybody to wear orange, and we lit up Inger Tower. So it's just a way to raise awareness and to really create that buzz about hunger.
Mm-hmm. Now there was a recent report that came out that looked at kind of the portrait of those who are hungry in our region. Talk about that and maybe some of the statistics that came out that people might be surprised to hear about.
You know, I think what we learned is that a lot of people are just like us in the Northland, to no surprise. One of the most startling facts, I think, is that 52% of those who seek services of our partner agencies are employed. And I think that would surprise a lot of people to learn that, you know, many of these hardworking individuals are working either part-time or full-time, but at a wage that's just not meeting the ends of their family.
Are there income requirements when people go to a food shelf? Or?
You know, it really depends on the food shelf. Oftentimes they use a federal poverty guideline, you know, but there's always cases of emergency or just high need that a family will need those services and will get support.
Shaye, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the choices people have to make between eating and maybe paying other bills.
Exactly. That's one of the things, again, that came out of the survey. We know that in the Northland, 63% of people reported that they had to choose between paying for medicine or medical care over food, 64% transportation, you know, hard choices when it comes to utilities or food. So our organizations and our partner agencies are really those that are able to support families who are just living on nearly nothing.
What are you seeing in terms of just the numbers of people who need food services? Has it gone up this year? Is it stable? Has it gone down as the recession has kind of evened itself out?
You know, in the last year or two, we've seen smaller increases than the previous 5 years, but over the 5 years, we saw increases of 60 to 70% at our region's food shelves. Again, senior use has quadrupled since 2008. So more seniors are seeking assistance, and of course more children as well as part of the family structure.
And how do you reach the children, you know, beyond just the food shelves? Because there are school programs and backpack programs and things like that to kind of make sure that these kids get food, even if their parents don't drive to the food shelf and pick it up.
Correct. Yeah, there's many youth programs in our region, like the Boys and Girls Club or Valley Youth Center, that provide meals after school. Second Harvest also participates in the backpack program, so we're bringing food to local school districts. Children are identified by teachers or staff, and then product goes home on weekends for the kids so that they've got food for their family.
Typically, who seeks food assistance, and if they're seeking it, how do they do that?
You know, there's really no one demographic that we see. It can be students. We were talking about that off camera. There's a high student population now that needs food support. You know, we see a lot of families, senior citizens. So there's really not any one age demographic that's higher than another. Oftentimes they will contact an organization like Second Harvest because it's high profile. We're able to refer them to their local food shelf or hunger program to access support. And there's, you know, the federal nutrition programs and other programs that we can also make referrals to.
You mentioned the orange color for food awareness. We saw some hunters dressed in blaze orange in some commercials a little bit ago. There might be some hunters out there who are wondering if they get an extra deer, does the food shelf or the food bank take venison? Is there anything that they can do with that?
Yes,
surplus?
so we do accept venison as long as it's processed by a USDA facility. So we have to just assure that is the case. Food shelves, the same thing. They'll often accept it as well.
Talk about the difference between the food bank and the food shelves, because, you know, we've had you here a number of times, but every time it seems like there's a little bit of confusion over what your specific roles are.
Exactly. Second Harvest is, of course, the region's food bank. So our role is really primarily to rescue nationally and regionally donated food donations that we bring locally to our Duluth warehouse. Once the product is here, we turn it around to about 120 nonprofit programs in northeastern Minnesota and northwestern Wisconsin.
So you're their shopping center. They come to you to pick up the food.
Basically, they're accessing donated food, and we know from food shelf statistics that about 70% of the food that goes to their local participants, whether it's in Aurora or over in Hurley, Wisconsin, comes from Second Harvest. So we really provide a critical source of food for local communities.
Shaye, how often can a person or a family seek assistance from a food shelf?
You know, it really depends, again, on the individual food shelf policy. We see oftentimes that it's once per month, but you know, there might be people that go to different food shelves just because they need that food support. So it's not as strict as maybe one would think. There's often flexibility in that.
I hate to think of this because we're just wrapping up summer, but we're not too far from the holiday season, which is a huge demand, I imagine, for you, and also a time when you get a lot of donations. But are there certain things this year that you would encourage people to maybe donate?
You know, certainly we're looking for cash donations as a food bank because our role is really to pay for the transportation and access that food nationally and bring it locally. So for us, that's really important. You know, volunteering, I think there is such high demand. Our programs increase. That means more volunteers are needed at local food shelves or our food bank to really make sure that food is going out the door and that families are getting fed at the holidays.
How charitable have individuals and companies been to help stock food shelves, help stock your organization?
Really for the hunger arena, as I would call it, or the industry. During the economic, crisis or times that we've been through in the recent years, we've really seen donations keep up with pace of need. And we've been fortunate to be an organization that really has seen people be very generous and really want to help their neighbors.
Good.
So we're hoping that continues.
Yeah. Okay. Shaye Moris, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here tonight.
Good to have you here.
It's time for the week's business headlines from Business North. Superior-based AMSOIL has found a new market for its oil products. After years of laboratory work and testing, the company has developed a lubricant designed for the gearboxes used in the very large windmills operated by electric utilities. By the end of the year, AMSOIL will be used in more than 5,000 wind turbines in the United States. Wind turbine gearboxes are large and in difficult-to-reach locations, so the lubricant had to demonstrate proven quality and longevity. So far, the company has gained a 15% market share in the large windmill category.
Area forest products industries hit hard in recent years by a slowdown in home building, and declining demand for paper are facing another potential obstacle. Federal regulators are now reviewing the need to protect the northern long-eared bat, which are suffering massive population losses due to a disease known as white nose syndrome. The bats are valued because they consume a massive number of insects. If they are declared endangered, loggers may be restricted to working only during summer months, which would require them to purchase expensive equipment and probably force many to go out of business.
Construction has begun on a large expansion at Rice Lake Weighing Systems, which manufactures scales for a variety of industries. The 68-year-old company, which employs more than 400 in Rice Lake, is having a 62,000 square foot addition built at its headquarters. Rice Lake Weighing makes everything from massive truck scales to highly accurate electronic scales used in the healthcare industry. With the added space, the company will be able to add about 60 people to its staff. For more business and economic news, visit businessnorth.com.
If you have a comment about our show, call now. Dial 218-788-2849 to leave a message, or send your comments in an email to almanacnorth@wdse.org. And you can visit the WDSE website for news about the station, watch clips from your favorite programs, or even sign up to become a member. And Julie, the first weekend of September is really shaping up to be a pretty good one.
Yes, beautiful weather and starting to see some hints of beautiful color too.
We are indeed, but then later in the week, a little downslide in temperatures. All right, for Julie and the crew at Almanac North, I'm Dennis Anderson. Have a great weekend. Good night, everybody, and be kind.